wanted to discuss why Rav Oshaya never included Rav Chia's penalties. Because remember, Rav Oshaya had 13 penalties, the four, not penalties, damages. We had 4 from the Mishnah, which is ox, pit, mave, and fire. And Rav Osha included that in his list. Plus, he included in the list the 4 custodians, which is the unpaid custodian, the paid custodian, the borrower, and the renter. And he contained 5 payments, the nezek payment, which was actual damage, which you pay whether an ox damages a person or a person damages a person, and 4 additional payments, which was pain, refuah, which was the healing, the convalescing part, and the humiliation part, of which obviously Rav Chia includes that. Rav Chia came first, so Rav Asher included those of Rav Chia, but he said, why didn't he include the additional 11 damages? And the 11 initial damages was double compensation for a thief, 4-fold and 5-fold compensation for the thief of a sheep and an ox, respectively, a robber, Zomemim witnesses, the rapist, the seducer, defamer, one who contaminates somebody's produce with tumah, one who mixes teruma in somebody's ordinary produce, and one who renders someone's one nesech. So we're going to discuss in total. Rav Chia is 24. And what we said was that the Gemara answers Rav Oshaya discusses only compensation payments. He does not discuss penalties. And what we did yesterday is we explained that with regards to Rav Chia's explanation of a thief, for example, there is a penalty payment, because a standard thief, as it says in Exodus 22:3, if the theft shall be found in his possession, he shall pay double. So that is Rashi's explanation. It's clear as day. Rashi is accurate. Then what we said is for agricultural thievery, where when it's a sheep, you pay 4 times the value of compensation, which is the principal, which is the compensation plus a 3-fold penalty. And if the theft is an ox, you pay 5 times the value of the ox. So it's the principal, which is the compensation plus a 4-fold penalty. So the minute there's a penalty, what we said is that the penalty is the av, and the compensation falls within the penalty. Because if it's more than the compensation, it's regarded as a penalty. Therefore, the penalty is the av. So Rav Oshaya is saying that whenever there's a penalty involved, he doesn't discuss that case particularly, because the damages that we're talking about are where there's no penalty and compensation to recover the loss and that the person sustained while damaged. And the scriptural sources for the thief is in 21:37. We're talking about the 3-fold and the 4-fold penalty. Okay? Then again in Exodus 22:8, we also discussed an issue where a thief admitted to his crime before he was convicted by the court. So therefore he doesn't make the double payment penalty. He just pays back the compensation of what he stole, either the article or the financial equivalent, because the court has to find him guilty. So if they make him take an oath and at that point he comes clean, he pays back just what he took. And that's according to Rashi. Am I making sense, guys, in terms of recap? Yes? Just say yes.
Yes.
Excellent, guys. Now what we said is a robber is distinguished from a thief in one particular respective, is that a robber uses force, whereas a thief uses stealth. In other words, he breaks in a home at night. And we were a little bit puzzled because we said a robber is never required to pay a penalty above and beyond the value of his robbery. He's only required to return that which is robbed. And the proof of this is in Leviticus, which is Vayikra 5:23. He shall return the item that he robbed, again, according to Rashi. Now, Rashi is not making his own interpretation. The biggest commentary that we've got on the Chumash is Rashi. Rashi was a genius. So it sounds counterintuitive. It sounds like a robbery or a hijacking is much more traumatic than thievery. So if anything, you would think the penalty would be higher for a robber than a thief. And what we're saying is here, no, that's not the case. And we want to say why. So I just want to propose something here. He said, firstly, when somebody comes to you at that point, they never had guns, they had a knife, and turned around and said, thank you, I will be your robber for the evening. Can you please show me a list of your goods that I may shop for? And he'd take it at knife point. You're not going to get cute with the guy because nobody wants to be impaled or shot. So although it is a little traumatic, the one advantage is that it doesn't generally escalate because you don't have time to pull out a weapon. Do you get what I'm saying? The guy generally comes with another person. You're out-armed, you're outmatched, and you hand it over without a struggle. It's not the case with a thief that breaks in your house at night. Because when somebody breaks in your house at night, it brings this case that Gavin and I learned. I don't know if Gavin joined the Gemara Shir at this point. This was in Sanhedrin 72a. Okay? And it says, a burglar is found breaking into a house may be killed by the owner of a house with impunity. And this is in Exodus 22:1. And because of that, there's a sentence on Kivlei B'di Rabba Minay, meaning that that particular case where his life is in danger, the robber, he doesn't have to, in that case, pay the, what do you call it, pay the financial penalty if he broke a barrel in the process, because if you're going to lose your life or your life is at risk at the same simultaneous time as you're creating another discretion, then the lesser payment is the case of roidef, where you can kill somebody when your life is in danger or they're pursuing somebody else. So kivlei b'di rabba minay means that if the person commits two acts, like for example, they're breaking Shabbos, and in that period of time while they're breaking Shabbos, they cause you financial damage. The financial damage part is waived because they're going to pay with their life. So you always use the higher crime in order to convict them. The lower crime is waived. Okay, so you need to check on that particular source. But it's in that perspective that if you come to catch a thief in your house, your adrenaline is rushing. And according to, there's a whole argument with Rav and Rava in terms of who's pursuing who. Is the thief pursuing the homeowner because the thief is caught now? He doesn't know if the homeowner is going to overreact and kill the thief, and therefore the thief is going to draw the gun first. And the homeowner doesn't know if the thief, adrenaline is rushing and will want to, in self-defense, kill the homeowner. So that's where one of the concepts of roidef comes from. And based on the fact that the thief's life is at risk, he doesn't have to pay a penalty fee. He only has to return what he robbed. And if he damages items while he's robbing, that's waived because of the kivlei b'di rabba minay. Does everybody see that?
Yeah.
Just repeat that 1 sec, Damon.
Okay.
What you just said.
Okay, so what I'm saying is there's that case in 72a with Sanhedrin, where it says if he breaks in the house and destroys a barrel of wine, okay, because his life is in danger, the thief, and that barrel damage of the penalty is waived. That's a whole separate discussion in its own. But how we relate it to this is very, very simple, is that a thief is more risky than a robber. Because if a robber comes with 4 people, fully armed, and said, I would like to take something from you, you're going to hand over your car keys, you're going to hand over your items without a fight because you know it's not a winning position. When you're startled in the middle of the night and you've got your wife and your children in your home, you're going to react very badly. And this is going to turn out to be hectic. And that's why they want to whack the thief with a double payment, where there's a penalty of there's the compensation for the theft and the penalty of a double payment, because that can end up being far more tragic. Because the homeowner doesn't know how he's going to react. He doesn't know if the thief is going to draw a gun on him. And the thief doesn't know if the homeowner is going to overreact because his wife and children are there and going to kill the thief. So each one is almost armed to kill the other. Does that make sense? And because the Gemara wanted to deter that, they made the penalties for thieves higher than robbers. Any questions on that, guys?
Yeah, I do have a question.
Sure.
I would think that most thieves would try enter a house when you're not around. They'd wait till you leave and then enter your house. Very few would enter a house whilst you're there. You know, I'm taking South African as example. They'll generally break in during the day when you're out. So I don't quite get it, you know.
All right, so we did cover this in Sanhedrin, and you weren't there for maybe 1 or 2 sessions. You weren't well, so I just wanted to address this issue. The first thing is that the kivlei b'di rabba minei, in the case in Sanhedrin 72a, is a thief that generally breaks in with stealth at night. Okay, the reason why you never broke in during the day is because communities lived very close to each other. And they had what you call a neighborhood watch. Remember that your entire wealth was in physical objects. There wasn't a bank to protect you. It wasn't an abstract form of wealth where people would need ATM pins and they would need, PIN numbers and OTP codes to get into your account. You carried your wealth. They were physical. And people were much more vigilant not to lose their stuff. So during the day, people were awake. And they were always monitoring each other's property if there was any stranger there. Are you with me? That's number one. Okay. This is a very good question. And this is a case where it says it breaks in fact, in this Gemara, it uses stealth as an example of breaking into a home at night. And why at night? Simply because at night, everybody would go to bed at a certain point. So that was the thief's best chance to get away with it. But if you hear a scuffling in the middle of the night, and a thief, for example, stubs his toe or falls down the stairs or something goes wrong, and your children are there and your wife is there, your adrenaline is going to rush. And you're not thinking clearly because you don't know what this guy's intention is. And he doesn't know if you're nuts because you're panicky about your wife and children. And therefore, he's going to shoot to kill and you're going to shoot to kill him because you don't know, as it says, this whole argument in Gemara Sanhedrin, you don't know who's the roidef here, who's chasing who. If it's a thief that's chasing the homeowner or trying to kill him, or the homeowner the thief, because everybody's adrenaline is running in overdrive. You can't read each other's mind. And it's because of that there's this double payment. But it was specifically used as an example of breaking in at night because during the day, people would watch out for each other.
But just thinking about the thief that breaks in, you've got more chance. You've got no chance when a robber holds you up. You have to give up your stuff. That's
exactly the point. In other words, when somebody comes to you and there are 2 or 3 people and they come to you with a gun, like they use an example of horses and coaches. You know, when a highway robberman, it's the same as a hijacking, where a few people come and then they take stuff from you. You know you don't have a chance because it's not one person. A thief generally works alone because... but robbers generally work in groups. And because you think you've got a fighting chance, or because your family is with you in your home at the time, your reaction is much more difficult when you really know you don't have a fighting chance. It's precisely for the reason, Gavin, that you said. It's specifically for that reason. That's what it brings forward.
Okay.
But do you understand what I'm saying?
I accept it. I mean, I understand the argument. I would say that you would have a chance against a thief. You got no chance against a robber. Just hear me out. You got a chance against a thief. You could shoot him dead, and then you don't lose anything. Whereby with a robber, you got no chance. So I'm just giving you that.
That's exactly the point. And let me say it again, because this is the one part you're missing. Because you got no chance with a robber, you're not going to put up resistance. Okay? When you and I were held up at gunpoint when we were by Carisbrook and Nantes, okay? We said thank you for shopping at Damon and Gavin. You know, it's because the guy had his gat loaded. It was fully ready to go. But if somebody's scrounging around in your house, in that particular case, you think you have a chance. And it's exactly because you think you have a chance that the robber adrenaline is in overdrive. That's why there's a rule, kivlei b'di rabba minei, because the robber is thinking his life is in danger, not the robber, the thief.
So you got more chance of getting shot.
Yes, because he's startled. He doesn't know what you're going to do. You don't know what he's going to do. You're both thinking the other's going to draw first. And because you think you've got a bit of a shot and that surprise element, you're more likely to resist. And one of the things is that Ian Shapiro, remember that discussion where Rav Simcha was talking about the case that with a home invasion, a person doesn't want their items taken. So unless they see a gun from a thief, sometimes he's going to fight to get his items back. And it's going to end up in tragedy. And that's why there's a double payment for a thief to try and deter him.
Okay, perfect. Got it.
Okay. Sham, it's something you just got to think about. Now we're going to discuss the next issue of why Zomemim witnesses is not only compensation, it's also penalty. Have any of you guys got an insight? I don't want to give it to you. I want you to try and think.
So what was the question about the Zomemim witnesses?
Okay. Do you know what Eidim Zomemim are?
No.
Okay. Michael, Kevin, do you know what Eidim Zomemim are?
I know what Eidim are. I don't know what Zomemim are.
Eidim witnesses.
Okay.
I know, but I've still got questions.
Okay. Have you done Makot, Gav?
No, I haven't done Makot.
Okay,
I've discovered this in Sanhedrin.
Okay, well, so it's a Mishnah in Makot 4a. I don't know if you want to share it with the group or must I say it, whatever you prefer.
Well, I'm not taking it from. I'm taking it firstly from memory. I'm not reading it, and second of all, I'm not taking it from Makot.
All right, so then let me just give it fresh. Okay, so as Eidim are witnesses. And Zomemim it's not false witnesses. Zomemim are conspiring witnesses. A false witness is somebody that made a mistake. Are you with me? They might have got they might have mistook the fact that they saw a navy sweater for a purple sweater or something like that. Or they might have mixed up the times. That's what you call a false witness because their testimony isn't true. Zomemim are conspiring witnesses. And the word Zomemim is plural, which means you need two witnesses in order to convict. Okay? Now, there's a principle in Makot 5a which says that you have a special process known as Hazama. So Hazama is that, say that, for example, there's a first group of witnesses and they testify against somebody. And then Hazama is when a second group of witnesses come and say the first group of witnesses can't be telling the truth because we were with them in a separate place or we saw them in a different place. Does that make sense? So they're caught out as having conspired against the defendant. Anybody have questions up until now about this before we go on in terms of...
I'm good.
Who
do they conspire against?
Okay, so Kev, let me give you an example here. Say you owe me money. Can I say I owe you money? Okay, I owe you money, and I don't want to pay you the money. I owe you $100,000, and I think it's better that you get. Say I owe you $100,000, and I think on top of it you might have had an indiscretion with my wife. And I'm quite happy not to pay you that $100,000. And I figured, you know what? You've had this indiscretion with my wife. And based on this, I think I'd like to give you the death penalty. I've had it with you. Then what I'll do is I'll pay maybe $20,000 to a set of witnesses and say to the set of witnesses, I want you to testify that in fact, you did create a particular indiscretion. It didn't have to be murder, like a blasphemy or idolatry that's worthy of the death penalty. And I want you to say that you were encouraging people to commit idolatry. And once you get put to death, I don't owe you the $100,000 back. And, well, good luck, because that's what you did to my wife. So I'm quite happy that you disappear. And then it comes across that the witnesses that I hired were seen drinking in a bar in Four Ways, okay, and picking up a different group of girls on the night in question where they said they witnessed you with my wife. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
They're false witnesses.
Yeah, I don't want to use the term false. I want to use the term conspiring, because false implies they made a mistake in the
To
testimony.
fabricate an allegation, like...
Yes, but the reason I'm using conspiring is they're conspiring to have the innocent defendant convicted of a crime. It's not a false witness as in they made a mistake and the person ends up being convicted of a crime. They're conspiring and conniving. So
okay.
in Makot 5a, it describes them as conspiring witnesses. In other words, they're trying to say a falsehood in order to get somebody convicted. There's a conspiracy amongst the two witnesses. Does that make sense? So the process hazama means that the Zomemim are caught whereby a second pair of witnesses testify that the first pair could not have possibly seen what they testified to, because they were with the second pair of witnesses in a different place. Makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Zomemim were with the first pair of witnesses. The Zomemim, not the second.
So what I'm saying is the Zomemim were, at that point they were just witnesses. They become Zomemim, conspiring witnesses at the point that they're caught. And Hazama is the process at which they're caught. Where a second group of witnesses turn around and said that first set of witnesses couldn't have been there witnessing the crime because they were with us. Correct. They in fact were with us. So they're caught out through the process of Hazama. It just means Hazama is that point at which they were caught out by a second pair that witnessed the first pair in a different location. Okay.
Yeah.
Does everybody understand before I go to the next concept?
Yeah.
You have to understand this.
Understand the concept.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Now, once witnesses become Zomemim, their testimony is disregarded and they're subject to a special reciprocal penalty, which renders them liable to whatever punishment or payment they attempted to inflict upon the object of their testimony. So, for example, if the two witnesses wanted to get somebody killed because that person the person that was paying these witnesses owed this person a lot of money, and if they got him killed, they wouldn't have to pay the money back, then the false witnesses are given the death penalty. If the false witnesses just want to get him to pay money, they are subject to that reciprocal payment of money. If they want him to get lashes, they get the lashes. So whatever they wanted to do to their defendant will be done to them. It's a reciprocal penalty. Does that make sense?
Yes, makes sense.
What happens to the original guy? So that's you, right? You got these two witnesses to conspire. Is it backtracked to you as well?
Okay, that's a wonderful, wonderful question. I'm so pleased you raised it, because this is what's going to be discussed in an issue of a defamer. Gavin, it is a brilliant, brilliant question, which is Motzi Shemra, somebody that defames, that has caused the witnesses to render a false accusation. And we're going to discuss what happens in that particular case. So it is going to be addressed in the next year, absolutely. So it's a brilliant question. So thank you for that. I just need, if we get cut off another 5-6 minutes to finish off the issue with Zomemim, then we're done for this year. Then we're done. I just not everybody understands the concept of Zomemim. So where Gavin learned this in Sanhedrin was in a case. Sanhedrin deals with capital cases. So there it mentioned Eidim Zomemim wishing to put somebody to death, And in that case, if they're caught out, before the person is convicted, that is done to that person. Does that make sense? When you're dealing with cases in Bava Kamma, if you wish to cause a person a financial penalty, there's Eidim Zomemim that are through Hazama, which are found to be false, have to pay that penalty that they wish to enforce on the defendant. And the same thing with lashes. If they wanted corporal punishment, that person to suffer it, they themselves get convicted with that reciprocal penalty.
Good. Yeah, good.
Thank you. It's it's well explained. Thank you.
Okay, no, but I had to explain that to you, Gav, because you only learned it in cases of the death penalty.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so this case of Eidim Zomemim is in Deuteronomy 19:16 to 21, or for Kevin, it's in the chapter 19 to paragraph 16 to 21. Verse. Chapter and verse, yeah.
Okay, it's okay.
Chapter 19, verse 16 to 21. Have I cheered you up, Kev? Kev, cheered you up?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
As long as I didn't offend you.
Kev, I thought about what you said. I apologize. It's actually not going to take more time to just do, say, chapter and verse, and we say the King James Bible or whatever it is you want to say. It's fine. I'll do that with pleasure. The reason I bring the colon point is that when somebody's doing research, when you type in the word chapter and verse, the Christian reference points come up. I've tried this into research, and it's problematic. And if you're looking to see what J.C. Penney said, or Yoshka, it's fine. It comes up quickly. But if you're looking for a Jewish source, the minute you mention chapter and verse, all the Christian mythology comes up. So when you use the colon, the Schottenstein comes up, the Sepharia comes up. So just in terms of your own research. But I'm encouraging you to do both. But when I speak it over, I can try and remember doing it the chapter and verse if it makes you feel more comfortable. Kevin,
no, it's fine. It's fine.
I'm not going to be perfect at it because I'm going to explain it the way the Gemara does, but I'm more than willing to try. So I'm sorry if it came across pedantic, but just remember the Christian sources will come when you use the word chapter and verse. I urge you guys to test it. The last time I tried to look at what happened with Rabbi Akiva and Yoshka came up, and he had a spinning cross. So I thought to myself, okay, references are a bit off here. All right. So, all right, let's get stuck in because one or two people are expecting deliveries. I want to thank you for the time. Let me quickly discuss that issue. Now that you understand the issue of Zomemim, of what it means to be a Zomemim as a conspiring witness, as opposed to false, meaning you got your testimony muddled up. And just remember, after the process of Hazama, which is where the Eidim Zomemim, they were Eidim at that point, witnesses that got caught conspiring when they became the Zomemim, the Eidim Zomemim, the conspiring witnesses. And that process is Hazama, is when a second pair of witnesses testified that the first pair could not possibly have seen that event that they testified to because they were in a different place with the second pair of witnesses. And what we said was that there's a special reciprocal penalty that whatever they wanted to do to that individual or those individuals for convicting them will be done to them. And why I'm saying individuals is they could be testifying to a case of adultery, which is a death penalty, okay? And in that case, they're convicting more than one person.
How do we know, can I interrupt for 1 second? Sorry,
sure.
It's directly related. How do we know that these, the first lot of Zomemim are not conspiring and in fact are telling the truth, and that the second lot are in fact conspiring and making up that they were in four ways and saw them in four ways? How do we know that?
Okay, so it is a brilliant question, is that we need to be very careful that the second group of witnesses weren't paid by the defendant to get him off and to get the first pair of witnesses convicted. There's an entire process that is discussed in Makot about how that's done and the legal process of cross-testimony of witnesses. And it's discussed in other parts of the Gemara. Even in Sanhedrin, remember, Rav Simcha discussed what happened, that you could have a second pair of Zomemim, which exonerates the first pair, exactly in the case that you said. So it's dealt with at length. So it is a brilliant question. You're awake, and it is that question is of big concern to the Gemara. So processes are fulfilled. Well done, mate. Well done. Good. I'm sorry we can't go through it here, Gav. It's just a different discussion, but it is addressed, and it's a valid point. All right. So what I wanted you guys to understand is as follows, is in the case of Zomemim, Eidim Zomemim, why is it not seen as compensation, and why is it seen as a penalty? Because again, Rav Oshia discusses only compensation payments. He does not discuss penalties, and he feels that Rav Chia explanation of one of the damages that are paid for is in fact a penalty and not a compensation. Does anybody have any insights as to why before I explain it to you?
Sorry, you actually froze for a while on my side. I don't know if it happened to everybody. So I missed some of the last 2 minutes what you spoke about.
All right. So again, Gav, tell me what Rav Osher does not discuss compared to Rav Chia.
So Rav Osher only discusses compensation.
Exactly.
And Rav, what's the other guy's name?
Chia, Rav Chia.
Rav Chia only discusses penalty. Well,
no. He discusses.
He does He does touch both. That's right. Yeah.
The reason being is Rav Chia came first. He was Rav's uncle and teacher, which came before Rav Yehuda's student, which is Rav Oshaya. But Rav Oshaya is concentrating on Rav Chia's list. Remember, Rav Chia's list was 24, and Rav Oshaya's list was 13. It was actually 9 because the 4 were from the Mishnah. So he's concentrating on that in terms of the compensation aspect. But Rav Chia talks about compensation and penalties. And what Rav Oshaya is saying is that Eidim Zomemim is not compensation, it's a penalty.
Correct. Okay.
So what we want to know is why. Do any of you have an insight?
As to why he focuses on penalty as well?
No, that's not at all. Why Eidim Zomemim is not compensation, it's a penalty.
Because it's
Class, what we're going through here is we're going through a list. First thing we did is we said, all right, let's go through the list by Rav Chia. Why didn't Rav Osher bring a thief? Because he said that with a thief there was a double compensation for standard theft, which means if you're paying a penalty plus the compensation back, it's under the other penalty because you're paying more than you took. Therefore, it's not compensation. And in terms of agricultural theft, for a sheep, it's 4-fold and 5-fold that you pay back, which in fact is a penalty, same as a double compensation, which is the compensation and a single penalty. So with regards to a thief, we said that in that particular case, he doesn't discuss the thief simply because you're paying back more than you took. You with me? So that was with the thief. And then we said with the robber, well, in that particular case, a robber only has to pay back that particular amount, so it's going to address later on why he never included the robber, which would seem to be purely compensation. Now we're on to Eidim Zomemim, which is saying that Rav Osher never included it in his list. We want to know why Rav Osher never included it in his list of 11 damages. Okay? Why? No, sorry, this list of 13 minus the 4 in the Mishnah, which was 9. Why didn't he...
Can I add? Because I think because for compensation you don't require witnesses. For penalties you do. Because for compensation,
not at all. And I'll prove it to you. Is because what we learned before as a thief is that the thief, if he comes to admit it before he takes an oath and before the witnesses convict him in court, he only has to pay the compensation aspect back, which means take a robber that only has to pay the compensation, right? The witnesses convict the robber. It's the witnesses themselves that convict the robber.
Okay, no, correct.
So it's a good point, but in this case it isn't valid. Any other suggestions from Michael or Gavin or Kevin or Arthur?
Because it's a penalty.
Yes, what I'm saying is, why is it a penalty and not compensation? There's certain aspects. Any suggestion?
Because it's like a secondary. It's not a primary type of example. It's a secondary. I don't know.
What do you mean by secondary, Michael? I'm trying to understand.
It's not I don't know. It's not a standard type of. It's sort of. No, sorry. Let me think about it.
Okay,
can I try something?
Sure.
Okay, so from one understanding, he's just stolen an item. So because the item, he hasn't done damage to you physically, okay, he only pays back for the item he stole. But if he did damage to you, there'll be more penalty. Is that something else? Okay, I'm just checking.
No, it's a good suggestion. We're not talking about thief here. We're talking about conspiring witness. But let's just answer your question in terms of the thief.
Okay.
A normal thief pays back double.
Okay.
Once the court convicts him, he pays back the compensation plus a penalty of double the amount that he stole. Therefore, it's under a penalty because he's not paying back the payment he took. The definition of compensation is if I took 100, I pay back 100. Not if I took 100, I'm paying back 200. 100 for compensation, 1 for penalty. The minute you're paying more, the compensation falls under the subcategory of penalty because you're paying out more than you've costed the person. So it's you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So isn't
the other way around? Isn't the other way around? The penalty is when you pay out more than the compensation. You pay an additional amount to the compensation. Why do you say
yes, you're doing that with the thief. That's exactly what I said to Arthur. In other words, a standard thief, okay? A standard thief, according to Exodus chapter 22, verse 3. Kev, you happy? According to that, an explanation by Rashi, if a thief shall be found in his possession, he shall pay double. So that's exactly the point, Marco, is that he's not paying back exactly what he took. Only in the case of a robber, there seems to be a question, which is going to be addressed later, because the robber just has to pay back what he took. So there's a bit of a question, which we're going to deal with later.
Can I offer some insights?
Before you do, I just want to see if it makes sense to Marco a sec. Marco?
Yeah, it's making sense, but so sorry. Are you saying that the Rob example? Are you saying that because it comes from the Torah, it's directly? You're not talking about penalty. You're talking about a straight. Is it a compensation now?
No. What I'm saying to you is as follows: is that every source of how we pay back has got a scriptural verse, which is why, and a chapter and a verse, of which I quote for so that you guys can check up on me. You can't have any sort of law which forces you to pay unless there's a scriptural source for it. Okay? That's number one. Second thing is that the difference between a compensation and a penalty is a compensation means that you pay back exactly what you took or the item itself, and a penalty means you pay back more than you took. So if in the amount of a penalty constitutes a certain percentage, which is compensation, and the extra is a penalty put to the person for the fact that you were having to pay more as a deterrent, that is no longer pure compensation. It's a penalty because you're paying back more than you stole.
Okay. Yeah.
Good.
Okay,
that makes sense.
No, I understand that. So just related now to carry on further, and I was saying why Rav Shaya didn't treat it as a.
Okay. So, sorry, guys. I know Arthur and Kevin and Gavin have a couple of insights, but we need to get the issue clear before we add insights. I hope you don't mind, because everybody needs to be on the same level of clarity. So what we're saying is, basically, Rav Shaya got his list from Rav Chia. They're all learning it from the same scriptural sources. Rav Chia came first. And Rav Shaya is not including all of Rav Chia's list. And the Gemara wants to know why.
Yeah. Okay, why?
And that's what it wants to. And Rav Shaya says, listen, all I'm interested in discussing is compensation according to the first Mishnah. I'm not saying we're not going to go into it in depth. He's going to say, listen, guys, if you damage somebody in some way, you need to pay it back. anything in terms of more than you took that you have to pay back is not something I'm prepared to discuss at this juncture.
Okay. So robber would be considered, sorry to interrupt, but because a robber pays back exactly what he has stolen, or attempt to have stolen, it's considered compensation. There's no penalty, so therefore a shire would include it because it's compensation and not a penalty.
Yeah, so what we're going to say, we're going to come back to say later in the Gemara, you hit the nail on the head, is that we're going to say, hang on a second, you glanced over robber, because a robber and a thief is not exactly the same thing, because when we really analyze it, a robber pays back compensation. Again, he pays back exactly what he took. And a thief pays back either a double penalty in terms of normal theft, which is still compensation plus a penalty of the initial amount plus you times that by 2, times it by 1. So in other words, if you stole 100, you pay back the compensation of 100 and you pay a penalty of 100. And because that's the whole category of a thief, it's considered a penalty because the total of which you're paying is more than what you took. So a thief, we can understand Rav or Shire, but we don't understand a robber so far where you have to pay back exactly what you took.
Now, Rabbi Shire did, the opposite way around. Rabbi Shire did only discuss robber because it was only a compensation.
No. So he excluded robber as well as the thief. And what we're going to come to learn later is why. In other words, because we're going to catch him out and say, listen, we understand the case of a thief where you either paid double as a thief or you paid fourfold or fivefold compensation, which was the initial compensation times a threefold penalty and a fourfold. You're paying back more than you took. But let's get back to the robber point, because you only pay back what you took at force. So why did you not include that? Right. Yeah, and it's going to come back and say exactly what you said, Michael. Exactly. Okay. Good. All right, Kevin, and I think Arthur had a question, or Kevin.
Yeah, can I just add something? My guess on, I think it's Rabbi Shire, who just went for what's it called, paying back compensation as opposed to penalty, is because if you look at the 4 primary avos, ox, pit, fire, and mave, it was just purely compensation. There was no penalty.
Correct. So exactly.
So penalties will obviously come further down. They'll start dealing with penalties. So it's premature. It's a little bit premature for Rabbi Osher that brought in all these penalties at this point in time, when all we're really dealing with is compensation at this stage.
Correct. So, by the way, Rav Chia wasn't premature. Rav Chia wants to learn it all in damages, almost as categories like chapters in the beginning. And he said, we'll deal with each of these and unpack it at a later stage. Rav Osher said, let's stick to the 4 primary damages in the Mishnah, which are compensatory in nature. It's not that Rav Chia was premature. It's merely that he's stating, well, let's put the table of contents out in the beginning anyway and just add them to the 4. Like you want to add the extra 9 to the 4. Let's add the full 24 now, and we discuss them and unpack them as the time comes up. So, Gavin, correct. That's a good point. It's a very good point, Gav. Anybody else wanted to ask something?
Thanks.
Kev?
No, I'm cool.
After you cool, Kev?
Yeah.
Okay, you cool. Okay. So, in terms of Eidim Zomemim, let's just unpack the issue here where you don't have to guess. Now, in a way, it does seem like compensation. Let me just tell you why there's a whole discussion. It's not so clear. If you're planning to do something bad to me, okay, you're planning to get me 39 lashes, and you caught out as a false witness amongst 2 witnesses, and then those lashes are given to you, what's being done to you is exactly what you plan to do to me. Does that not look like compensation? You're not paying anything more than what you intended to do to me.
Yeah.
In other words, you were conspiring to have me lashed for a certain amount of lashes. You were caught out, and now you're being lashed for those exact same lashes you intended to me. Is that not compensation? Exactly what you intended to do to me was done to you now.
But it's not primary. It's secondary.
No. Okay, just put that aside now, because what we're talking about is a case where the Mishnah mentions 4 damages, and Rav Chia's list and Rav Osher's list comes to include a table of contents within the beginning of Bava Kamma. And the discussion at issue at hand now is only that why did Rav Osher not put it in his list? We're not asking why Rav Osher had a whole list and Rav Chia had a whole list. We're just mentioning why Rav Osher didn't include Rav Chia's list of Eidim Zomemim within his arms. Do you get what I'm saying? So we're saying that he did not discuss penalties, he just discussed compensation. And what we're saying is Eidim Zomemim also does, is it a penalty or is it a compensation? So your objection here doesn't work with the Gemara because there are other lists that need to be added. Gavin, what is it you think we're asking here?
No, I would have thought that there's no need because of the fact that there's no penalties. We're just dealing with what's it called? Contribution, right?
No, compensation.
Compensation, sorry, the tide. Due to the fact that we're dealing with compensation, you're not going to have you're not going to require Eidim Zomemim.
No. But you're missing the point of the context here. What it's saying is the first 4 damages in the Mishnah deal purely with compensation. They don't deal with penalties. Okay?
Correct.
So what I'm saying is Rav Osher has his list that is only dealing with compensation. He's not discussing penalties. And what we're saying is, why isn't Eidim Zomemim on his list of compensation when it would appear to be compensation with Eidim Zomemim?
Because it's being applied only due to the fact that there's potential of penalties being applied.
Not at all. Nonsense. And it doesn't make sense what you're saying. And the reason it doesn't is, again, I'm going to go through the statement again with you guys. The 4 damages of the Mishnah, you compensate for the damage you caused to another person. Rav Asher is entitled to bring cases that deal with compensation damages. He's not teaching penalties. So why can't he bring compensation damages?
Yeah, no, he should be able to.
Exactly. You're right on the mark. He should be able to. There's no reason why he can't list it. Just like with Rav, that mentioned man and Mava, and it's discussed in later chapters, and he said we want to include the general broad category of damages here. What Rav Osher is doing is mentioning these damages because this is under the topic of Mava, man. This is man that causes the damages. This is man that stole. This is man that robbed and raped and defamed and conspired. This is under the category of Mava.
Correct.
You get
correct.
it? Yeah. So, exactly. Now, Gav, you've got it. You got it perfectly. And then what it's saying is, then why don't we bring Rav Chia's other aspects of Mava, man, which discusses penalties? Because it would be under the category of Mava. So, as we said, Rav Osher is of the opinion that we only bring, at this point, compensation. We don't bring penalties. And Rav Chia says, no, it's under Mava, man. Whatever damage man causes, we're going to bring those damages under Mava. Now, just as a list, not to discuss it in depth, just as a list under Mava. So they're both correct. So according to Rav Osher, who does not teach the 11 additional damages of Rav Chia, what we are saying is we're saying why? Because Eidim Zomemim, again, looks like compensation. Why does it look like compensation? I intended to do this to you guys. I was caught out Therefore, it is done to me. You're being compensated of what I intended to you and plot against you is being done to me. Does that not seem just like compensation? You're not doing any more. You're not doing it. I'm not being punished any more than I intended to do to you. How does that look like a penalty?
But it's indirect.
Okay, so that is a different discussion. But Rabbi Oshia taught separately cases of direct and indirect. One, and it is included that he did indirect. Why? If you look at the 4 Shomrim, they never damaged directly with their hands. They damaged by being neglectful. So to here, it's indirect, which Rav Oshia does teach. You remember that?
Yeah. So I think he's entitled to bring in compensation, but he should leave the penalties out at this stage.
Yeah, but Kev, you keep missing it. Because you were mentioning that the Eidim Zomemim is not mentioned by Rav Oshaya is because it's an indirect damage. And what we said is Rav Oshaya's 4 damages of the Shomrim, okay, the custodians, is indirect. They never damaged it on...
No, you explained that. So, no,
and
I can't get back.
Keep saying again and again and again and again is Rav Oshaya does not teach penalties. He just teaches compensation. So what I'm saying is, if you look at Eidim Zomemim, does it not seem like compensation? What I intended to do to you is done to me. Nothing more than that. Is that not the definition of compensation? Why was there a penalty? There's nothing extra. There's nothing extra that's being done to me that I didn't intend to do to you. You get what I'm saying? So they want to know, why didn't he include it? Because it looks like a compensation, not a penalty. If I intended to cost you 100 Rand and I was caught out, then I'm paying the 100 Rand. They don't make me pay 200. That's compensation. It looks like it's compensation. It's not a penalty. So why didn't Rav Osher include it? Does everybody hear the question? I feel that everybody's on mic and nobody's responding.
No,
but is
listening.
Isn't the guy that's being prosecuted that has the Eidim Zomemim, he would get a penalty though. That's why he's in court. If he didn't go to court and he acknowledged beforehand that he did steal.
Kevin, you're missing the point of Eidim Zomemim. You're completely missing it. Again, you've got a defendant that's accused falsely of a crime. He is accused falsely and he has to pay 5,000 Rand. Okay? He's accused falsely of causing damage or stealing or whatever. And there are witnesses that said he stole 5,000 Rand, right? Or he robbed somebody of 5,000 Rand. And those witnesses are found to be false. The Eidim Zomemim now have to pay 5,000 Rand. So the Eidim Zomemim, they try to damage him, this innocent man, with a 5,000 Rand payment, are now subject to paying 5,000 Rand to this person that they try to damage. They're paying back the same amount they tried to damage him for.
No, correct. Then it should have been included with Rabbi Osher.
Exactly. But do you understand why now?
No, I do. Sorry, I thought that the guy, even though he was being set up, was in the penalty phase already.
Okay, is it clear now?
It's clear now, yeah.
Great. Does anybody not understand why it looks as though it's compensation? Again, the false witnesses intended to convict an innocent man, okay, of 5,000 Rand. When they were found to be false, they have to pay back the 5,000 Rand they intended to cost this guy. They're not paying back a 10,000 Rand penalty or anything more than what they intended to take. So it looks like compensation. Does everybody agree with how it looks?
But is it not a penalty because they never actually stole the money? So they're actually being inflicted with a penalty that's equal to the compensation value.
They intended to get the person to lose that money. That didn't mean they have to steal it. They were trying to create somebody else with the damage.
But they never actually stole it. So it's not compensation from their perspective. they're gaining the penalty. That's what I'm saying.
But then why would you have Eidim Zomemim and all in Sanhedrin when you learn that people that are falsely witness that somebody should die if they're caught to be false witnesses?
Well,
they wanted somebody to die. And here, when you want somebody to pay and you are caught as a false witness, you pay with the exact same way that you try to convict them.
Well,
exactly.
then Rabbi Osher should have incorporated it. It doesn't make sense.
Yes, that's the whole point of Mazama, is that you're paying back exactly what you intended to do to the person. So why shouldn't they? They were quite happy to cost this person his life in a case of a murder trial. All 5,000 rand, all lashes. And they're asked to pay back exactly what they intended to do to somebody else. How is that 1 cent over? They're not given a higher death penalty in what they intended to call. They're not given one more lash than what they intended to do. They're not having to pay 1 more cent in terms of what they intended to do to an innocent person. And how to damage it.
Okay, agreed. You sold. I've got it. Fine. So then Rabbi Osher should have incorporated it.
Fine, good. All right. Guys, how long have we got left? Because
8 minutes.
We've been hammering this out. Fine. So let me just discuss the reason. Does anybody have any further problem with this?
No, I'm clear.
Of why it should be considered a penalty? Michael's
not there. Michael's left.
Fine. Kevin, any questions?
Yeah, you explained it well. Yeah. So I'm getting a bit restless. It's quite long, but it's good.
It is long, but
because it's double share.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So what I was going to say to you is as follows: is that it appears to be compensation, but it's not, because again, if you actually cost me 100, then I have to pay back 100. But the law of Eidim Zomemim is that you only get convicted as an Eidim Zomemim if your plan didn't work before the person had to pay for it. Meaning, if the person was already convicted, the Eidim Zomemim law doesn't apply. If they, for example, were falsely accused of murder and they were murdered, the Eidim Zomemim are no longer subject to being murdered themselves. Okay? It's only that they caught up before that the Sanhedrin rendered judgment.
Okay, then,
so therefore, it cannot be compensation because compensation generally is due to a testimony and conviction by court.
Okay, so then when the Eidim Zomemim are found guilty of conspiring, they have to pay the money to the guy they were conspiring against.
Yes,
he gets that.
Okay,
so he gets that money.
That didn't cost him money. He never had to pay at that point.
So he does. No one gets. They only. So who do they pay the fine? Who do they pay the money to? The what's like a penalty for them? Does he get it or the Sanhedrin gets it?
What I'm saying is he gets it if it's money.
Okay, so he gets it.
But if it's lashes, obviously they get the lashes or whatever. If it's money compensation. But the point of it is as follows: is that the guy never actually had to lose the money to pay, because with Eidim Zomemim, they were caught out during the court process. Eidim Zomemim isn't afterwards, if they were found out to be false witnesses, that they're given that penalty. It's only before. And since the person hasn't lost his life or been given lashes or financial, financial loss, he's not being compensated for that loss. It's actually a penalty that they're going to inflict, because in fact, he hasn't lost the money, he hasn't lost his life, he hasn't received the lashes falsely. Because this Zomemim process only occurs during the trial, when the false witnesses are caught out. So in that way, it's recorded as a penalty, because it's not like you've paid the money out or you got the lash and then afterwards the Zomemim, because the trial's over, you got your lashes and then they were caught and then the Zomemim were lashed. That would be a compensation, because you were lashed, they were lashed. The person got a death penalty, the Zomemim got a death penalty. The Zomemim, the laws of Eidim Zomemim only apply when they were caught out during the trial, and therefore the person hasn't sustained the loss they intend to do. And that's for why technically it's actually a penalty and not a compensation.
So,
because had it already been done to them, it's compensatory. Since it was not done to them, it's a penalty.